Hello, I'm Chandler Klebs, and I have another idea that we could talk about in our podcast, our Free Will Science Religion podcast or impersonal opinion podcast. In fact, it might be more an impersonal opinion podcast. The subject of the afterlife, if there's an afterlife and all that sort of stuff. And we've talked about it on some episodes, but I really want to get deeper into this. Because there's a lot of books, of people who have supposedly died and gone to heaven or hell and then come back and told about it. And see, my mom's read a lot of these books, and she tells me this, and I'm like, well, I don't believe, I told her, I don't believe something just because somebody wrote it in a book. Because if I just believe something that somebody wrote in a book or something that I heard somebody say, well, then I'm just believing what somebody said, which means I can believe anything, which would mean somebody could tell me we have a free will and I believe, which is just crazy because see, I'm extremely skeptical about everything. You know what I'm saying? Especially this afterlife thing. So I'm probably going to I'm not sure exactly how to go about researching such a topic because everybody's got their agenda. You know what I'm saying? You've got Christians writing books and promoting books saying that there's a heaven and a hell and all that, and just trying to promote the religion. And then, of course, you've got other people, who are very firmly against the idea of an afterlife. Um, and it's weird because, like, my current position on it is that there's no way consciousness could be separate from the body. Like, I'm pretty sure that the type of consciousness that we're usually thinking of is pretty much tied to the brain. But at the same time, I'm not so sure about if there might be consciousness in the rest of the body in some extent. But that's more like, more like the unconscious processes, the heart that beats and the lungs and what all of my internal organs do that I'm not even aware of what they're doing. So, but it's sort of interesting because I don't believe in a soul or afterlife or anything like that. And part of the reason that this issue is worth discussing is because somebody's beliefs about the afterlife can have a really big impact on their life here sometimes. For example, part of the reason that I became concerned about the abortion thing was because after I no longer believed in heaven or hell or anything, it was kind of interesting because I thought, well, then when somebody dies, they're gone. It was kind of a strange thing. It just seems like Christians have this comfort that it brings them. Like for whatever reason, when somebody dies, they have this idea that they'll see them in heaven, or something like that. And so, for example, they'll get pregnant and they'll have a miscarriage, but they believe that their baby that didn't survive till birth still exists somewhere and they're going to meet them someday. Which is interesting because believing that might help the person feel better. But see, the reason that it never comforted me is because I believed I was going to hell, of course. You see, because it's interesting how, well, I don't want to get too sidetracked onto that. I've talked about that before, but yeah, I always believed that I was going to hell, because every time you do something a Christian doesn't like, they tell you you're going to hell, and there's no clear indication of what makes someone go to heaven or hell. The Christians can't agree on it, you know what I'm saying? And so it's sort of a weird thing because, well, how do you know that your miscarried baby or your 3-year-old that died didn't go to hell? Like, how do you know that? They just assume that they went to heaven and are experiencing some bliss. And I think it's because it just makes them better to feel that way. They don't ever think about their children going to hell. They say things like, "Oh, bad people go to hell." But then at the other time they say, oh, well, as long as somebody prays a certain prayer and believes in Jesus, it doesn't matter how bad they are, they still go to heaven. So, there was this conflict, and I'm thinking, well, I didn't even know what to believe. So basically, that's just a really short version of the story. But I didn't even know what to believe. But now I just look at it and I really do think that consciousness is physical, meaning that as soon as somebody destroys my body, that I'm not aware. I'm just really dead. And so that's a big part of it, is I don't believe in an afterlife anymore. And it's kind of interesting because somebody, I really think that if you believe in an afterlife, you have to consider, well, does this affect your life now? Because if it does affect your life now and what you do, then you better know what's true about the afterlife, right? But if there is no afterlife, then basically this life becomes all important. See, that's the way I look at it, is that if this is the only life that we're going to get, it's so much more valuable. And so that's my thoughts on it right now. And I'm interested in the effects on behavior that it has on people, what they believe about the afterlife. Because that's what I'm interested in. Because right now I'm not convinced that an afterlife is possible, really. But I'm interested in talking with people more about that. So if you have thoughts on that, you could comment on this video, and maybe we can have guests on our Free Will Science and Religion podcast, or perhaps the Impersonal Opinion podcast, which is kind of our Anything Goes podcast, about the afterlife, and have some serious discussion on this. So let me know what you think. Bye.